Kim West, the Sleep Lady, and on this episode of the Gentle Parenting Show, I'm so excited to have my colleague, Jana Danielson. She is going to be talking about women's health. She is also, in particular, a pelvic floor expert. Boy, are we excited to hear about this. So welcome, Jana.
Kim, thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Yeah. So, I know we want to dive in and do some myth busting on pelvic floor and how we as women, as you said, don't have to be a member of the P Club after we have a baby. But before we do that, tell me a little bit or tell us a little bit about your journey of how you came to this place.
Absolutely. So I am a farm girl from Saskatchewan, Canada. So my upbringing was like lots of fresh air, big gardens, just, community. Like that was my upbringing. And in my high school years, I started experiencing some undiagnosed digestive pain. And I would, take Tums and do things like that. I was a little bit of an overachiever. And this pain continued with me. It continued when I moved away to college, and it got worse and worse and worse. And to the point where I was experiencing this digestive pain kind of behind my belly button every single day of my life. And I felt like I was starting to live a double life because on the outside, I looked extremely healthy. I taught fitness. I was finishing my business degree. I was engaged to my high school sweetheart. And inside, I was figuratively dying. And there were days I couldn't get out of bed. I went on a journey with my medical team, and I was poked and prodded and had to drink really gross things and had things put in my body that I never had things put there before, only to one day be told by my team, my medical team, that they believed that my pain was in my head and I was seeking attention and I should have a nice life. And back then I didn't acknowledge it as depression, but it was. I went into probably a 3 to 6 month depression where I started questioning things like, I wondered why, did I pull the short straw? Did I do so? Like, why was God punishing me? Did I, maybe I shouldn't accept this engagement proposal. Why would this man want to marry me? Could I even have kids? I grew up in an entrepreneurial family and wanted a business. Could I even grow my own business? All of these questions started to just spin in my head. And it wasn't until I actually saw Madonna on the cover of a fitness magazine back in 1999, and the word Pilates was splashed across the front cover, that I thought, what is this? And I was a big Madonna fan, so I bought the magazine and I read the article over and over and over and over again. Because what I was reading about this form of movement that focused on breath and alignment and spinal movement, it sounded a lot like yoga to me. But I was intrigued, so I went. And you know what, ladies, I was on about 11 different medications at that point, and it was impacting all areas of my life. I would get, I have a hard time falling asleep at night. I was more anxious. I started to actually get pelvic floor discomfort, and I hadn't even had kids yet. And I was like, what is going on, right? And so 16 weeks into my Pilates journey, I was off all my medication, and I literally healed my body from the inside out. And at that point still, I thought it was just a fluke. I would knock on wood and cross my fingers, and I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell them that I was off my medication because I was worried that it would all come flooding back, and it didn't. And that really, Kim, was what shifted my mindset, my trajectory for my career, how I've been showing up for women now for almost the past 15 years. And I can actually say that I'm quite grateful for my pain, because had I not experienced it myself, I would not be serving women the way I do today.
Absolutely. I mean, I first of all, I'm sad that you had to experience that. It's unfortunate, but I don't know the exact statistic, but I have read it that we as women are more likely to be put on antidepressants in this exact kind of scenario. Often it will happen after having a baby or in menopause or perimenopause, or, if they can't figure out what's going on with you medically, they assume it's in your head. And so good for you for not, maybe you had to, be depressed for a few months there, but then to say, I'm not going to accept this.
Right. Well, and
I'm
you
going
know
to
what they say,
do something different.
I believe that life is a series of contrasting lessons. You have to experience the uncomfortable, shadowy moments to be able to
Mm,
emerge like that butterfly out of the cocoon. And that's really what I felt I did. And the biggest lesson for me was that I realized that I had it within myself to heal. I just had to figure it
mhm,
out, right? I just had to connect with my body. And I think as women and as moms,
mhm,
that's one of the things that we just unconsciously do is we disconnect from our own self
mhm. Yeah,
for a moment of time because
yeah.
I have three boys. They're 17, 19, and 21
Mhm,
now, but there was
mhm.
a period of time where my body just didn't even feel like mine. Like it was growing a baby, or it was nursing a baby, or it had a baby on one
Right,
hip and one in my in my belly. And so it's hard to it's hard to remember what you were like when you were just a single entity. And this was one of the key
so true.
messages that came out of my pain journey was the reconnection to self is necessary and beautiful.
My goodness, how beautifully spoken and how very, very
Mm.
true. Um, and I think that also, societies kind of teaches us to, once you have a baby, you just focus on the baby, and you and yourself are not nearly as important.
No.
And of course, it's that back to that whole oxygen mask. Like, we're going to be better moms and parents if we take care of ourselves, first and foremost. Not to mention role models, for our children, about
Absolutely.
how to take care of ourselves and our relationships.
Hmm.
Yeah. So tell us then how, because I know we're like dying to get into the myth busting on pelvic floor. How did that? I know you mentioned briefly you were having some pelvic floor pain.
Yeah.
So how did then it expand?
So, kind of fast forward a few years, I left my corporate career and I started to because I was teaching Pilates out of my basement as my hobby. I taught to my sister and my friends, and then my husband got six of his buddies, and I started teaching four classes a week out of our basement. And four turned into eight, turned into 12, turned into 16. And we invested in some Pilates equipment, and this business actually grew out of just it was really my husband. One day I came up from teaching. He had put the boys to bed and he said, Jana, I wish you could hear what I hear. When you are down there, you become who you're meant to be. You are educating and inspiring those bodies. And honestly, Kim, like I was just, I still get shivers when I share that story because he saw
Mhm,
something in me that I didn't see. I was just doing it, right?
mhm,
And
mhm,
so we opened our first studio in 2010. And then in 2015, we expanded that to include an integrated health therapies clinic because my belief is that the body is a multi system unit that needs different things
mhm,
at different times. So you might need chiropractic care or acupuncture or massage or physiotherapy or
mhm,
nutrition or mental health. And the systems are always going to be, all the systems are going to respond to all of those therapies. And so when I did that, I started doing more work because Pilates is so focused on the core. The pelvic floor is a part of our core. And I'm getting into the first myth because women don't understand that our core is not just our abdominals. We think that our core is our six pack muscle, and we chase that damn muscle for years and years and years to try and
mhm,
have it show itself. And from a functional perspective, ladies, if our abdominals were stocks, and if we were going to invest in these stocks, the six pack muscle is the last stock that I would ever invest in because it does the least amount of work. But yet we've been
mhm.
told since we've been, teenage girls that you want these lines. So when you wear your bathing suit or your crop top or you're at the gym, you
Right,
have these lines, right? Um,
right.
but you know what it does? I'll tell you. It sits us up out of bed. It stands us up when we are putting on our shoes. It does, that's where diastasis recti lives in that rectus ab, right? So, I mean, I'm not saying it's not important, but women don't understand that that outermost layer of our abdominals has support deeper within. So there's a set of abdominals called the obliques, internal and external. They cross the front of your body like a letter X, like two seatbelts coming across your shoulder to your hip. And deeper to that is your transverse abdominals. And those actually start in the back of the body, in the low back, and they wrap around like a corset to the front of the body. The fibers reach down to the pubic bone and up to the sternum. So we have this beautiful cylinder that's our core. Then we have the diaphragm that sits atop of the core as the roof. That's our main muscle of respiration. And ladies, for those of you who are not using your diaphragm and who breathe from our neck, because our neck has our secondary breathing muscles. They're called the scalenes and sternocleidomastoids. If you are someone who counts the days, the minutes, the hours until you get to your massage therapist for your relief of your back, neck, jaw tension, headaches, and then 4 days later, you're back in that tension and you are wondering when you go again, I'm going to tell you there's a 99.9% chance that you are actually breathing with the supporting muscles in your neck and not your great big diaphragm, which is like a mushroom cap or an open umbrella. So when you breathe through your nose and fill your torso and you exhale out of your mouth, you're actually going to be using that big mushroom cap muscle. Now, here's the kicker in all of this. The best friend of the diaphragm is our pelvic floor muscles. So I want to just say that again. The diaphragm as the roof of our core and the pelvic floor as the floor of our core really are best friends. When one works, the other works. When one is asleep, the other one is asleep. So let me help you understand this. There's kind of two myths intersecting here in one. The first myth is that your abdominals are the only, that's all that makes up your core. And that is not true. Your core is made up of a three-dimensional cylinder, with which are your abdominals, with a floor and a ceiling, which is the ceiling as the diaphragm and the floor is your pelvic floor. So when you visualize that, and in the cylinder are all your organs, your spine, right? The next little myth that plays into that is that when we don't use our diaphragm in the right way, and when you inhale, it's like you're smelling a fresh baked apple pie. And when you exhale, it's out of the mouth with a bit of an audible HA sound, okay? That is a diaphragmatic breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. And when you start to breathe that way, and you're not going to breathe that way like 24/7, all right? But if you did this 3 or 4 times a day, 10 to 15 breaths, what's going to start to happen? Those fibers in your diaphragm are going to start to wake up. And over the next days and weeks, you're going to start to notice a change in your pelvic floor, because those muscles, the nerves that run through the body, they send messages. Those nerves are going to start waking up the pelvic floor. So if you only learned how to properly breathe diaphragmatically, you would improve your pelvic floor health. And when I was teaching my workshops at my studio, my classes at my studio, no one would talk about this, Kim. Like, I would talk about the pelvic floor. There would be like, it was like there would be like crickets. Nobody's asking questions. Everyone's straight faced. And then after my classes and my workshops, I would have a lineup of women, some in tears, my inbox full of emails saying, it's like you were talking to me. And I don't know what to do. I am not having sex with my husband anymore because I cringe in pain. I can't run with my friends anymore because I'm peeing all the time. I feel like I can't jump with my kids on the trampoline. I'm starting to have fecal incontinence. That's freaking me out, right? And so I was like, why is this a secret, right? Why do we talk about our pride? Like, why do we talk about down there? Why can't we say words like vagina instead of down there? And so I kind of got a little bit like, darn it anyways, I am going to do something about this. And that's when I decided to become, more educated so that I could pass on that information to other women.
I mean, I have like a million thoughts.
Okay.
First of all, I think there is, and it's sad to me that there is so much shame, but there's so much that we as women don't talk about with each other. I even think we don't talk about birth, and that it's not all the same for everyone, and not everybody feels the same way about it, and not everybody has a great experience, but yet we still are in the club, that. And then I don't know, at least for me, I think I was given the message like, well, that's part of being a mom. Hello,
Hmm.
welcome to motherhood, or hello, welcome to getting older, when indeed you won't be able to do jumping jacks or anything else without peeing your pants. And Kegel exercises are the only thing. And honestly, I don't even think we're properly taught how to do those. From what I understand, what I've been taught, like it's actually not what I thought. I
Hmm.
thought it was always like you pull in your vagina, but really you should like pull in your anus. I mean, like, why nobody's talking about it?
No.
And I've never heard, um, and not that, I'm in this field, but just as a mom and a woman, I've never heard about the diaphragm and the pelvic floor connection. I don't
I
know.
know.
Maybe everybody else has, and it's just me. Um, but that's fascinating to me. I've literally never had a single gynecologist or even a urologist tell me that. When I've gone to a urologist, being like, wow, can we do anything about this? Because I see my 84-year-old mother struggle with incontinence, and I just don't want to go there.
Yeah.
And there's
Well,
not really
yeah.
a lot out there.
And it really was the work. I was connected with a urologist or a urogynecologist from Reno, Nevada, Dr. Bruce Crawford, and it was my work with Dr. Crawford and his research that really inspired me to do something about it, to create something, not just courses, but my product, right? And
Hmm.
you would be like, his research showed that in 90% of pelvic floor dysfunction cases, it's a fitness issue slash movement issue and not a medical issue. So if there were 10 women in a waiting room waiting for because when you get pelvic floor surgery, most commonly they take mesh and they pin up your pelvic floor, kind of like
Yep.
pinning up like a hammock, kind of, right? And
Hmm.
the reason Dr. Crawford started asking questions of his colleagues was that he was seeing the same women 2 and 3 years back in the surgery for the same thing they had 2 years ago. And he started asking his
Yep.
colleagues, are you seeing this same women? And the answer to him was
Hmm.
yes, but you're a surgeon. Do your job and send them on their way. But he said, this is not right. These
Right.
are muscles, and any muscle in the body needs to know how to work. If we don't teach them how to work that muscle and we just pin it up, we live on a planet with gravity. Eventually, what goes up
Right.
must come down. And so my
Right.
work with Dr. Crawford really inspired me, because I was like, okay, if those 10 women sitting waiting for that pelvic floor surgery, if only one needs to actually go into that surgery room, but the other nine, I could inspire them and teach them how to use their breath, how to think beyond the Kegel, because you're right. The Kegel often is taught as a very static clench and release and clench and release. And
Right.
when you think about pelvic floor dysfunction, it's like a spectrum. You can have hypertonic, so hyper, so too tight, or you can have hypo, HYPO tonic, not enough tone. And then there's everything in between. So
Hmm.
when you're relying on a Kegel that has been taught to you as stop the flow of urine, start the flow of urine, stop the flow of urine, start the flow of urine, if I was going to train you, Kim, like, be your personal trainer, I would never say to you, all right, Kim, I want you to, bend your elbow, make me a fist, and then we're going to work your biceps today. So squeeze that bicep muscle and let it go. Squeeze that like, I would never train you that way
Right.
in any other part of your
Right.
body. So why,
Right.
why, why in the good,
Mm.
why would we ever teach a very, very important muscle group? Why would we ever train it that way? Because if you're already too tense, guess what's going to happen? You're going to become more like a rock wall, right? Because
Right.
you're going to be focusing on the clench, not the release, right?
Right.
Which is what you need.
Right.
It's the opposite. If you're lacking
Yeah.
tone, you're not going to actually get that contraction, that squeeze. You're just going to be really focusing on the release part. So it becomes
Mm.
kind of this no woman's land where, and what I started to coin was beyond the Kegel. How do you teach that part of your body to respond through a range of motion, like picking it up and putting it
Mhm.
down, picking it up and putting
Mhm.
it down. And so we'll talk a little bit more about the gift that I'm going to be giving at the end. And I actually go through this breathing, and really, we really dissect it so that you can understand the difference between that Kegel and then what it feels like to be beyond the Kegel.
So can we, before we do that, which I can't wait to hear about
Yeah.
that, but before we do that, I'd always thought that, if I'm, after I have a baby and I start, occasionally peeing in my pants, that that's not the same as pelvic floor disease disorder, that that was way more serious, that you heard about women whose their pelvic floor dropped and they had to have this surgery. I had heard about the hammock surgery in
Mm-hmm.
regards to the bladder, kind of helping the muscle hold up the bladder. So it's not, is there a continuum? And is it that birth does something to your pelvic floor, or how does that
Mm-hmm.
happen?
Okay. So,
Or just educate me.
yes, absolutely. So, coughing or laughing and peeing a little bit is classified as pelvic floor dysfunction. Is it as serious as a pelvic organ prolapse where you have your bladder or your uterus descending, right? Descending. And then,
Right.
see, when you talk about prolapse, there are four different, grades or stages or levels. So, um, let me give you an example. So I'm a huge proponent of pelvic floor physiotherapy. At my clinic, we have a pelvic floor physiotherapist, and I go to see her just like I go see my naturopath, just like, right, like I regularly see her because I want to know. I mean,
Mhm.
I am almost 49 years old. I want to make sure that I
Mhm.
have a healthy pelvic floor in through my 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And I had
Mhm.
had a bit of a cold. So I was coughing and sneezing when I went in to see my therapist. And so they do an internal exam. So she was in, she was in just checking me, and she said to me, "You have um, you have a grade 1 prolapse." And I actually, when so I'm laying, and I just went, ah! Like I actually made that noise. I was like, "I what?" And she's like,
Right.
"Yeah, I can feel there's a grade 1 prolapse here." And she's like, don't don't freak out. But she said, what has your stress level changed? Has your sexual activity changed? And I said, not like nothing like that. I said, I've just had this crazy cold for like the past 10 days where I'll start coughing and I just cannot stop. And she's like, well, that's exactly what's going on, because when you're coughing
Mhm.
or sneezing, there's so much intra-abdominal pressure coming down on the pelvic floor. It's like the pelvic floor just starts to
Mhm.
get weakened a little bit, right? And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
she gave me a few exercises to do. I went back probably about 6 or 8 weeks later, and my prolapse was gone. So here's the thing to understand is that
Mhm.
we want to be proactive in our understanding and our education about our pelvic floor, because you may have
Mhm.
a grade 1 or a level 1 prolapse after having baby. And if you
Mhm.
understand what that is and how to work with it, to correct it, to strengthen those muscles so they know when to relax and when to work, you're going to be good to go. Or
Right.
you just don't do anything about it, and you maybe have a second
Mhm.
baby, and now your kids are 8 and 10 years old, and you're like, what is actually going on in my vagina? And by
Right.
that time it's a grade 2, or it's maybe getting to a grade 3, and you kind of miss this beautiful opportunity to stay in the
Mhm.
preventative health side. I'm not saying that when you have
Yeah.
a grade 3 or grade 4, and grade 4 you are going for surgery, because usually by that time the organ has descended outside of the vagina, and all of the pelvic floor breathing and exercises in the world are not going to fight gravity and bring that those structures back inside of your body. So that's I want your audience to understand that if you get diagnosed with a prolapse, it doesn't mean that it's all downhill. If you can
Right.
take inspired action and start to learn, you can correct that. So, and then back to your question, yeah, the coughing or sneezing, a little bit of pelvic floor pain, prolapse, it all gets lumped into pelvic floor
Mhm.
dysfunction.
Okay. Oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. And that also explains how it, or at least vaguely, how it's connected to the diaphragm. I mean, it makes sense, right?
A
I
hundred
get a bad
percent.
cough and I'm more like and sneeze and I'm more likely to pee in my pants, and it
Exactly.
makes sense.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
When I was young, I that wouldn't have happened.
No.
But after two kids and
Yeah.
probably not doing
Yeah.
the right exercises afterwards.
Well, and the other
Yeah.
thing, Kim, that I want to mention because of who your, your audience is that even I have moms that come to me with their tween sons and daughters, they're 11, they're 12, and they're still peeing the bed and they don't want to go to sleepovers
Hmm.
and they are just like
Hmm.
creating all this anxiety in their body because they're 11 years old and they're
Hmm.
still peeing the bed. They've done, they've
Hmm.
looked into it, they've gone to chiropractic, they've done all the things that they have researched. And in a lot of cases, it is pelvic floor dysfunction in those young little
Hmm.
bodies
Hmm.
that is impacting, their ability to either completely empty their bladder before bed or to acknowledge that their bladder is full. So, especially really athletic kids, like if you have a high level little dancer at 10 or 11 years old, or, a hockey player or a gymnast or a soccer player,
Right.
there is a lot going on in the pelvic floor. It's not just a muscle for, sensuality or, once you hit a certain age. I mean, we have pelvic floors. And so I like to mention that when I'm educating because it just
Hmm.
shows the perspective of it's not just for a postmenopausal woman or a man after prostate cancer. This is our body,
Hmm.
and we should
Hmm.
learn about it in a more impactful way.
Well, okay, so much to say here. I know you have a camp energy blast for
Hmm.
kids. That
Hmm.
so maybe you could say a little bit about it, and then let's go back to what you offer moms and your Cooch
Yeah,
Ball, and
for sure.
okay, yeah,
All right,
connect it
so
all.
I mentioned that I'm the mom of three boys, and my boys have grown up around a mom that's a wellness entrepreneur, a Pilates instructor. I came home one day from work, probably about 8 or 9 years ago, and our middle son, Will, was working with his friend Hayden on our living room floor. He had a foam roller, he had a pinky ball. He's like, Mom, Hayden's got some back pain, so we're just going to do a little bit of release work. And I was like, oh my gosh, they listen. They're like little sponges, right? Like we leave all of our things
Yeah.
around the house, and they would pick up the ball or pick up a foam roller or a Pilates magic circle, and so that really inspired me to create a course that I would love to gift your audience. It's called Camp Energy Blast. It's for kids, 4 to 9 years old, and it's 10. My niece and nephew are on it with me, and it's 10 sessions that help to educate and inspire the love of our body, the love of movement into our kids. So, there's one session where we're animals and we're doing all these different spinal movements. And then there's another one where, we're learning about water and blood flow in a really fun way.
Hmm.
And so I'm excited
Hmm.
to gift that to your audience because I feel like it's never
Yeah.
too early. Sometimes our kids
Hmm.
are very athletic
Hmm.
and sometimes they're not. And I think as parents, we're like, oh,
Hmm.
well, she's more artistic and we don't, but movement is a universal requirement for our
Hmm.
body. Joseph Pilates said, physical fitness is
Hmm.
the first requisite of happiness. Our body wants to and
Hmm.
needs to move. And so it was with that perspective in mind that I created Camp Energy Blast. And I am gifting it to each of you today.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'm so happy to have that for all the children. So excited about that.
Good.
And I 100% agree. So going back to then, so we don't want to forget the parent, and in this case, the mom,
Mm-hmm.
tell us a little bit about, your course and your Cooch Ball, and then of
Yeah.
course your pelvic floor secrets
Okay.
webinar that you're
Yeah.
giving everyone.
So, ladies, you remember me telling you that I would do these webinars, or not webinars, workshops at that point. They were in person. Nobody would ask me any questions. And yeah, then my inbox was full of emails or people were waiting for
Hmm.
me in the parking lot. And I would go home and I would sit at the dinner table and I would complain to my husband about, why is it like this? Why don't we talk about it? And this went on for a few weeks. And finally he said to me, Jana, either do something about it or stop talking about it. And I was like, what do you mean do something about it? And he's like, well, make something. Make a course, make a product, do something that can give you the platform so that you can start to educate, inspire, and move these people. And I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. So the next day I got on the phone and I started phoning big sporting goods manufacturers like Spalding and Wilson, that make basketballs and volleyballs. And because I wanted to create a ball, I thought a ball is perfect. It's not
Mhm.
invasive. It's got a fun energy to it. And when you increase blood flow to the pelvic floor area, ladies, this is key. When there's a lack of blood flow, that I call the pelvis our cauldron. Okay, our cauldron
Mhm.
cannot create beautiful magic if it does not have blood flow, nutrient rich, oxygen rich blood to surround the nerves, the fascial tissue, the muscular tissue. It's just like
Mhm.
a plant that doesn't get watered for months and months and
Mhm.
months. That plant is never going to flourish. Our body is like that
Mhm.
too. So I created a product called the Cooch Ball for women and the Gooch Ball for men, because yes, men have pelvic floors too. Sometimes they don't want to acknowledge it, but they do. And in a man's body, pelvic floor dysfunction can show itself as pelvic floor pain. It can show itself as tight hips and low back. It can show itself as erectile
Mhm.
dysfunction. And so I wanted to make a
Mhm.
co-branded product that a woman could use or a man could use to create that beautiful blood flow supply to the area so that you could then, in addition to, so you sit on the ball for 3 minutes and you go through a 3 minute diaphragmatic breathing journey in through your nose, out through your mouth, and you start to get more connected to your body. There is a bit of an ouch factor. I like to say that. The ouch factor when you get on the ball is directly related to the health of your pelvic floor. So if you've got a lot of dysfunctional tissue, you might only sit on the ball for 30 seconds, not 3 minutes, and then you'll work
Mhm.
your way up. So you get this beautiful biofeedback, right? And as long as your breath is your guide, you are golden. As soon as you're holding your breath or clenching, you got to come off. And so the Cooch and Gooch Ball was my way of
Mhm.
finding that platform and I wanted to name it something sassy and a little bit edgy
Mhm.
because I wanted and it worked because I'll have people say, it's the what ball? Did you say Cooch Ball? And I'm like, yeah. And let me tell you more about it, right? I've only had two people in the last 2.5 years that have said, can you send me one without the branding on it? And I was like, sorry, I don't, so I've only had two women that have said
Yep.
no because of the name. And so in that 3 minute experience, you are over time, because maybe at the beginning there's so much tension that it takes a while to start to melt, because that's what we're doing is we're melting through the restriction to create the blood flow so that we can then neurologically change the patterning in our brain so that the diaphragm can
Mhm.
start to speak to the pelvic floor. It's quite a beautiful process. It actually is quite simple, and it breaks my heart all the time that this is information that women are hearing for the first time, because we should be taught this like in our health classes in school and we should be taught this when we're
Yes.
going for our prenatal classes, and we should be hearing about this when and we just don't. So that's the Cooch and Gooch Ball. They come with and I know, Kim, you're going to have a link in the show notes. It comes with
Yeah.
education, like a training program as well. For women, it's called Create Your Pelvic Floor Upgrade. And for the guys, it's called Gooch Power. My husband's on the Gooch Power course with me. And it can change, and it has, and that's my favorite thing is to get feedback from my clients. This has changed my life. I just had one of my male clients email me a few months ago, and he said, Jana, I am waking up as the 16-year-old version of myself every morning thanks to the Gooch Ball, right? And
Yay.
and that's what we want, right? This part of our
Yeah.
body, ladies, is about connecting to self. It's about confidence. It's about
Mhm.
sensuality, and
Mhm.
it's time that I was talking with a woman last week, and she said to me, the pudendal nerve is the main nerve that goes from our brain to our pelvic floor. It's a motor nerve, so it sends the messages, and it's also sensory. So the feel good and the not so feel good sensations in the pelvic floor. And she said to me, do you know that the Latin root of the word pudendal means ashamed? And I was like, it blew my mind, Kim.
Wow.
I was like, what? The main nerve that goes from our brain to this beautiful area of our
Hmm.
body, the Latin roots of it are the word ashamed. Like, it's no
Oh,
wonder this has stuck with us for generations. And you talked about
right.
shame earlier in the podcast. It's,
Yeah.
you know, and I think it's people like you that have a platform like this that can start to help women understand that it doesn't have to be, it's not a quick fix, right? I think our society has
Hmm.
become so
Hmm.
fixated on, I do this and in 21 days I'm good. This is not that. This actually is a life.
Hmm.
This is how I compare it. I said, would you brush your teeth once a week? Well, no, I'm going to brush my teeth probably multiple times, you know, morning and night.
Right.
It's the same as this. It's
Hmm.
actually a lifestyle tool so that
Hmm.
you can start to undo the decades of the lack of education and understanding and, you know, really come into our queen type sparkly power and be be amazingly confident in who we are, how we show up for our kids, our partners, our communities, our, you know, our, it just, it, a healthy, confident, sensual mom impacts
Hmm.
radically across this planet.
Amen. Isn't that for sure? Thank you for creating this for all of us,
Hmm.
both moms and dads and men and women and everyone um, in between. And thank you. And I can't personally wait to get my Cooch Ball and get started. And I will post
Hmm.
about my experience. And I know my improvement. I'm really excited about that, and also to share with the parents about your kids camp. So
Amazing.
tell us real quickly about your, what is it called? Your pelvic floor secrets webinar that you're
Yeah.
having, everyone.
Yeah. So,
Mhm.
ladies, I mean, Kim and I have really just like, we've just scratched the surface today. My goal for connecting with Kim and with you was to create some intrigue. Like, who is this Jana and what is she talking about? And
Mhm.
so the Pelvic Floor Secrets webinar is really like, think of it as like episode 2 of this podcast. We're going to take a deeper dive and I'm actually going to show you, you know, some of the myths that we busted. We just talked about the myth and we busted it. The Pelvic Floor Secrets webinar is going to show you how to do all of these
Mhm.
things that we talked about today. I'm going to show you and talk to you about, are you sitting properly at your desk? Are you standing
Mhm.
properly, you know, in line at the grocery store? Because there's simple things like posture can drastically impact in a negative way the forces of gravity
Mhm.
into our pelvic floor. So we're going to talk about that. I'm going to dissect.
Mhm.
I take about 12 minutes of the webinar to talk about the breath work, and we do it very slowly and methodically. I give you lots of different visualizations so that you can understand what we're doing is beyond the Kegel. And
Mhm.
so that's
Mhm.
really, you know, you should come out of that webinar with more confidence and clarity on what we started to talk about today.
Wow. Thank you. You're so generous. I really,
Hmm.
really appreciate it. And I know that my audience will too. And I'm thinking that I'll have you back when my next book comes out on newborns, because a big segment of that book is a whole segment on the parent and
Hmm.
taking care of the parent after you have a baby. And so we need to talk about this too.
Amazing. I would
So
love to
thank
be
you
back.
again.
You're welcome.
And if you want to learn more about Jana, which I know you do, and your pelvic health and her amazing camps and offerings, go to sleepLady.com/podcast, and we will have all the links to Jana and all the gifts on that episode page. So, again, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.